I will back you in any scenario. I don't mind being unpopular. That's fine. With the data behind it, you can't lose. You can't. No one can argue with the facts of the numbers. And that's why it's so important for me and my team to bed it into everything that we do.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 10X Recruiting, brought to you by MetaView. The weather is getting warm, and you can tell because I am running solo today. And I believe Sile is on one of those like 48 vacations they take per year in Europe. Meanwhile, you know how it goes here in America. We're still grinding. So on today's episode, we had Lynn on the show. Lucy is the head of talent at Cleo. It was an amazing conversation. She had many hot takes on stakeholder management, which I think you're going to enjoy. But I had two primary takeaways for this episode. The first is that she does monthly headcount priority meetings with the entire executive team. So a lot of us are in charge of managing headcount. And a lot of times it turns out the headcount plan changes. Usually when the headcount plan is locked in by like February, should have been done in January, but it's locked in by February. In March, it's already changing. And what she does is she gets the entire exec team together so they can reprioritize and figure out which roles recruiting should be focused on. I love that takeaway. The other takeaway is that she does a recruiting monthly review with her CEO. Now, I did this when I was at DoorDash. I find this to be one of the most helpful exercises because it gets the CEO close to recruiting. It helps them understand which problems that we're facing. And like Lucy does, she actually workshops the problems with her CEO. I love this episode. You guys will too. And here is my episode with Lucy. This is 10X Recruiting, a podcast from MetaView. Let's get after it. All right, Lucy. So you hosted, I think it's now the highest attended session in MetaView history last month for a webinar, which was called Mastering Stakeholder Management. Can you give us the cliff notes from that presentation?
Yeah, for sure. I think the key thing out of that session that I wanted to give to the team and those who did the workshop was essentially that historically, recruiters have been order takers. It's do as you're told. I don't really care about your opinion, but deliver what I tell you to do. And for me, I want to turn that on its head. And that's how my team to behave. So forget getting a brief, filling it, getting another brief, moving on. It's making sure that you can operate in the room as a valued member of the decision-making, I suppose, community, whatever you want to call it. And the only way to do that successfully that I've found is having the data behind you. Now, building out a system that scaled Cleo is all based in the fact of the information and the data that you've bedded in at the beginning. So all of our hiring managers have a weekly reporting session. So every stakeholder gets a dashboard within pipeline health, candidate movement, blockers, SLAs. If they haven't stuck to their SLAs, we're downing tools because I'm not particularly interested in wasting my team's time. Having the respect for the recruiter and the talent team's, workload is so important for me. And I've been known to say to my stakeholders, until you've written that interview process, until you've written those questions or that scorecard, we're not going to work your job because unless we have a full kind of picture of information, why should we? Ultimately, you want this person on your team. So do the decent thing and at least do your share of the work. The other thing that I was telling those at the workshop about was more around that pipeline review. So pipeline review and monthly prioritization are kind of interlinked. So on the pipeline review side, we are super on top of the people we put in front of our stakeholders. So we have a 30-minute sync per active role per week. This is what good looks like. You've wasted time sourcing against the wrong thing. Okay, let's regroup. Is this right? Is this wrong? We're not leaving this call until you tell me what you're looking for. And it goes back to that respect of my team's time, right? It's have you got a brief in your mind? Okay, can you articulate it? Yes. Does that actually exist? And that's where having the data, so being able to map the market, have those profiles behind you. It's a case of, okay, everyone wants a unicorn, but does that exist? No. So tailor what you're looking for, otherwise your seat will be empty. And ultimately, nobody wants that. The feedback I got from the room was, a few people were like, I could never say that to my stakeholder. And I think that's the thing, there's this constant almost power balance and where talent teams are seen as reactive. It's just do the job that's put in front of you. And I'm passionate about tipping that on its head.
Let me interrupt you. And I want to there's a lot to unpack here. Okay. So the first thing I'm curious about is you said every stakeholder gets a dashboard. What is on that dashboard?
So on that dashboard, each stakeholder will have access to the pipeline health. So how many candidates we've got coming in, how many candidates we've got coming out, what the pipeline pass-through rate for each of those roles are. So the three things that are sort of important to us is throughput, conversion, latency. Throughput, as you know, how many people we get in. If a hiring manager's saying, oh, we're not seeing enough people, it's like, well, actually, the data suggests that you are seeing enough people to get this role filled. So clearly, we're not quite aligned on what you're looking for. That's the way that we can use the data to evidence that either we're doing the right things or know where the problems are. The conversion, it kind of speaks for itself. So how many people are passing each stage? This has been so beneficial when it comes to interview processes that need a bit of work. It's well, everybody loves doing this whiteboard. You know, everyone who's in the machine learning team's done this whiteboarding. Okay, great. Does that mean that it's sitting on like a Reddit form somewhere and everyone's passing it, but it's actually not a good indicator of someone passing? That's where we can see, okay, 80% of people should not be passing a technical interview. The bar's too low using the data. And then latency is obviously time in stage. So that's where we can really say, okay, we need more interviewers. We need an interviewer pool. Can we use one interviewer rather than two?
Yeah.
So we've got double the interviewing capacity. It's having those dashboards in front of each stakeholder. So every week when we speak to them, we can say, these are the problems, let's fix them. And having that behind all of my talent partners has made conversations with stakeholders completely different. You know,
Totally.
I think there's a lot of people kind of think recruiters, especially those who come from agency, which the vast majority do, still trying to make a quick buck, as in get them in quickly, doesn't matter who they are. Like, and I don't believe that's the case. Any good talent partner wants great people in seat because they want the business they work for to thrive. So just having the data behind you makes you sound less like a bratty, whiny recruiter who's not getting their way because their candidates keep getting blocked. And it's actually no, the evidence suggests this is what's wrong. So we're fixing it.
So that's super interesting. I like that dashboard. You also mentioned stakeholder SLAs. What are those?
So a few things that we are super hot on is scorecard returning. So our SLA for a scorecard is 24 hours, 48 hours for like an exec level role. And I will empower my team to chase. I've sent people, I'm like, he's over there, go and ask him, go up to his desk and ask him, because ultimately, again, we are the people who have to navigate competing offers, you know, candidates disappearing on us. And as we all know, the rush to good talent is only getting more and more competitive, or the race even to good talent is more and more competitive every day. So I'm not waiting around for someone to fill in the scorecard when they find the time. If I can see them in the kitchen, I will be over there in the kitchen making sure that they get it done. And again, it comes with that data backed piece. Whereas if you can prove, okay, we lost X amount of people last quarter, term, whatever, based on us not getting back to them fast enough. Do you want to run that risk, or do you want to take 15 minutes to write the scorecard? I know what I'd do if I was the hiring manager.
Well, and also like with, MetaView and tools like that, like there should be no excuse not to like get it in and summarize it in 45 seconds.
Exactly that. Our team internally are always, I'd like to think every business now, have MetaView on hand and note takers sort of up to their eyeballs and think tools that make their lives easier. If you're not leveraging them, it's laziness. I don't care what you say. So yeah, that's one of the big SLAs for us. The other thing that is kind of an SLA, but more of like a hiring manager responsibility, is the documentation when building out a new role. Now, a lot of people said that's super like labor intensive. We just want to hire someone. I don't have time to write, scorecards for 3 stages and a hiring playbook and a what am I looking for document, or all that stuff. If I don't have that paperwork, my team is not touching your role. End of.
Okay, so that seems like very like drastic and dramatic compared to like the stuff I've worked on. Why do you draw such a hard line?
Time wasting. If I don't know exactly what you're looking for, if you don't know exactly what you're looking for to the point that you can't put it down on paper, how the hell am I going to know? How the hell is my team going to know? So let's take aside the job spec, because that one you can get your head around. I think the big thing is on the assessment piece. So at Cleo, what we do is all of our talent skills matrices are stored away It's linked to our people team's skills framework. And it's also baked into the hiring, like scorecard side of things. That circle is a never-ending cycle whereby you bring somebody into the business, they are assessed against the scorecard, which then goes back to the people team. All the skills are the same, so that at their first performance review, they can be assessed on that criteria. Now, stick with me here. I know that sounds really long-winded. However, when it comes to saying to hiring managers, write your documentation, otherwise we're not getting started, what you're actually doing is setting your stakeholder up for success when it comes to the quality of hire, the retention of that individual, and also just their success at Cleo. So making sure those two things are aligned from day one are non-negotiable for me.
Okay. So I hear you. And I think you're describing like the idyllic world, which is we know exactly what we're optimizing for before we kick off a search. Maybe I'm biased because I'm doing a lot of exec search right now, but I find with exec search specifically, I refer to it as like different flavors of ice cream. So there's like the been there, done that flavor. There's the up and comer flavor, right? There's like like let me try a new vertical flavor. There's all these different flavors, and depending on the role, I experience it in almost every search.
Yeah.
And I find that, maybe it's a CEO founder phenomenon, but these founders don't know until they go taste the different flavors. So how do you balance I don't know exactly what I'm looking for. I think like this is like generally the shape of the person, but I want to go explore and like start talking to people.
That's fine. We can do that. But by and large, everyone has an idea of what they want. Be it these are the types of profiles. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. This is this is the shape of business I want them to work for. I want them to be, leveraging this or that. When it comes to how can we document that, it is harder, I'll be honest. I think the big thing for us is being able, again, it needs to root back to something. And essentially, the way that we would structure that with the sort of individuals at Cleo and just generally is how would this person do well here, and use that as a starting point, because what do you want them to do when they get here? And then we can build that skills matrix that goes back to the people team, and then we draw out of that what we're looking for, almost reverse engineer it, right? And that's where the relationship between the talent and the people functions work so well. Now, a lot of feedback I got from the session was, well, I don't have a people function yet, I'm a founding talent partner, or my people team are too busy for that. And I get it. I am in a very luxurious position that Cleo's people function is very well built, and I have a fantastic counterpart on the people team. That being said, I still think that is a responsibility of anybody in my seat or any organization. They can build out that framework. Sorry, that was a bit of a around the houses way of answering that.
No, I agree. I tend to agree. So like I've actually started moving away from the job description and instead talking about like the mock, which was pioneered by Jeff Stump, who's at Andreessen Horowitz, which stands for Mission Outcomes Competencies. The mission describes like, what are they going to do? What specific outcomes do you expect them to have in their first 12 months? And the competencies is like, tell me a little bit more about this human being that you would like to work with. That is, it helps like narrow down the shape of the person, where sometimes the job description can just be a laundry list of shit that like doesn't actually help us narrow in on the profile we're searching for.
Oh God, no. And this is something that we faced when last year, we restructured our assessment process. So our whole interview process was turned on its head, and we now standardize across all roles within Cleo. So we have a problem solving interview, a skills assessment, and then what we call a level up. I think Amazon call it a bar raiser. They're the same thing, but so in that sort of problem solving, some of those, for tech specific roles or machine learning, product analytics, they are technical problem solving. But for the sort of other roles around the business, it's a scenario based question, and it assesses how you think, how you approach a problem. It's do you dig deeper into the data set that you've been given, things like that. Then there's the assessment piece, and that's assessing the role, be it a design craft interview or a coding session, whatever. And then the final stage is, does this person raise the bar at Cleo? So the way that we assess in that stage specifically is we will go back through 3 or 4 of their previous roles, and it's not so much a give me the highlight reel, it's more what was your impact. So, and it's really, really interesting because, I mean, God, if someone said that to me, And I'd really have to think about what made me when, 5 roles ago when I was an agency recruiter, what made me good at what I do and what I did? How did I get to that next role? And it really forces people to think about what they've done, how they've got there. And it almost sets the scene for what that next step is going to be, which if the interview goes well, is at Cleo.
I got asked a question one time. Like some of these questions I think are really good that people don't actually use in their interview process, but it ties your results to the business. I think that's ultimately what you guys are trying to do. So somebody asked me one time, I love this question for recruiters, which is like, who is your best hire ever and why? And it's like, holy shit, like I've hired a lot of people, but like, who's the best? And the right answer is obviously someone who had the highest impact on the business. Right. And so similarly here, what you guys are doing with your bar raiser interview, which I like your version of it more than kind of like the subjective Amazon person who shows up, who's got gray hair, who's been doing it for 10 years and just kind of figures out if they like you or not. Your version is like, what impact did you have on your business?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why that's so impactful is we make everybody do it. So grads all the way through to exec level. And it really gives people the opportunity to, rather than, because ultimately, especially at senior roles, people know how to sell themselves. Like you've been through enough interviews, but that interview being something that's a non-negotiable for us, it's almost like a great leveler in a way, which we've seen to be really impactful. But no, back to my point on the standardization and how we link that back to what we're looking for, less a laundry list, more a who's actually going to do well here. What we found is we sat down with all of the leadership and all of the hiring managers in the business, and we got them to map like the competencies for the role. Where are you assessing it? So it's like, okay, you've got a 5-stage process, but you've got 4 competencies. So what one are you doubling up on? What one are you missing? What one are you over-indexing on? And we were able to then standardize across the entire business. Everyone had a vertical in every vertical with all of the skills that were needed for the role and only the skills for them to do well here. And therefore, come performance review, they had the skills and they were set up for success at Cleo as well.
So what happens in an interview to where you don't get amazing signal? Like it happens, right? Like we're humans, we're dynamic, like we can come up with the best structured questions ever, but like sometimes we're still unsure when we leave an interview. Do you guys like sometimes adjust the process to be like, hey, let's double click more into this, like with another follow-up, or are we just basically it's binary? If we didn't get signal, that's signal in and of itself.
No, the way that we operate is if there are kind of question marks, we'll call a huddle. So we'll get the people who are in the interview together. Did you get the same signals? Our scorecards are confidential until the other person submitted it. So there's no biasing between interviewers. And then what we do, we'll provide the next interviewer with, I was on the fence about X, Y, and Z. Did you get a signal of this? Or can you look for this?
So we're talking a lot right now about the stakeholder management level, which is more at like the hiring manager level. In our prep call, you told me about this monthly review you do with your CEO. Can you talk about the doc that you use for that meeting and how you're giving health signals on how recruiting is going?
Yeah, for sure. So I sit down with Barney, our CEO, monthly to talk about hiring. So I will give him an update on where we are against our hires, like our hiring target, and then go into our OKR progress. And then what I do each month is essentially we do a deep dive on what we call like a problem area from the month before. So if everything's going well, then I can put my feet up and retire. That's never going to be the case, unfortunately, as much as I'd love to be on a beach for 6 months of the year. So there's always something that needs work, right? And that's where, again, how would I know what needs to work? I've got the data backing me. So the big kind of problem area when we spoke was in our analytics team. We had really poor conversion rates from our talent screen to whiteboard. The candidates were sitting in stage for up to 15 days. And it was a really, really poor process. There was also the rate of acceptance was really low. And, we were just trying to understand why. So I had all of this data in front of me and I was able to relay that back to Barney. Then we came up with this solution to reprioritize the order of the interviews. Essentially, it sounds really simple, but this is something that has been such a game changer for us. But by reprioritizing the orders of the stages, we were able to say, look, these skills are assessed here, here, and here. let's move it around. And therefore, if we don't get the signal straight away, we know to exit them from the process. We also have bigger interviewer pools at the top. So it almost felt foolish not to use them all. And then as it filters through, it becomes a smaller pool of people, but it doesn't matter because less people are getting to that stage. So that was really helpful. Now, the other thing that I don't think Barney was super happy with, but he respected it, and that's what counts, was, as with most founders, and this came up in the workshop, it's, I want the best of the best. And it's like, cool, quantify the best of the best. Well, Russell Group unis, Ivy League, has to be all of this. I want a comp sci degree and this, that, and the other. And I was like, okay, fine. So I ran a bit of analysis because whilst in theory that makes sense, I wasn't convinced that the people who we were putting through needed to be that shape. So what I did was I took all of the analytics team performance data from the 2 months, the 2 performance reviews prior, with a kind of, the goal was identifying those common signals. So I was able to pull all the data and I got signals for education, previous experience, degree subject, and how that correlated to strong performance. And of the 38 people who had a performance rating, 50% of them didn't go to a Russell Group or an Ivy League university. And the degrees weren't particularly comp sci leaning. It was actually a maths degree that the majority of people had. So I was like, okay, fair enough. So I went back to Barney and said, look, here's the data. I can go and tell my sourcing team, Russell Group, Ivy League, nothing else. But what you're doing with that is blocking future you from 50% of your workforce. And he didn't love it because, everyone wants the best of the best, but it really, he respected the fact that the data suggested that his vision of the best in his mind is not what was on paper. So we were able to then go back to the sourcing team saying, okay, scrap the Ivy League, scrap the Russell Group, start looking for maths degrees. And lo and behold, we hired 12 people the quarter before and 38 people in this hiring stage.
Okay, so there's a lot to break down here. First thing for our American audience, what is the Russell Group and maths degrees?
So a Russell Group university is like an Ivy League. So it's the group of universities that are prestigious and sought after. And then a maths degree is, like a mathematics. So rather than going down like the economics or science route, I mean, listen, it falls under that STEM degree. Do you guys have that in the US?
To be honest, I was a political science major, which is a bullshit degree, so I have no idea.
Well, I don't have a degree, so I'm already trend at Cleo.
One of us. Well, this is a good example. So that brings up my next point, which is this. I think this is one of the things that recruiters don't do really well. This is how you see the trees separately from the forest. You guys have this monthly review. By the way, I used to have these at DoorDash and I hated this fucking meeting. And it's one of my biggest regrets is I should have loved this meeting because it's a forcing function for you as the recruiting leader to take a step back and to observe what's going on. And then you need to put in a narrative. You have all this data. Then you need to put in a narrative to your CEO about what's going well and what's not going well. And you guys then spend time on what's not going well. And I'm assuming you come to that conversation with a hypothesis on why it's not going well, and then potential solutions. Is that right, Lucy?
Absolutely.
And this is what I think a lot of recruiting leaders, because we're quote unquote busy, we end up not having these business check-ins, which by the way, the rest of the business is having all the time. So the analog for sales is the pipeline review meeting, which happens once a week, and then the QBR, which happens once a quarter. And also the monthly, the monthly close and stuff. Sales has this on their head all the time.
Yeah.
Because recruiting is kind of just running. And if it's going well, no one's looking at it. We aren't the ones who are proactively calling for a review. And I actually think this is part of the reason why you're magical at Cleo is you guys have this conversation to where now you're showing the CEO what's going on, which gives him really deep insight into how things are operating. And then together you can problem solve based off of your proposed solutions. And then now with his backing, we can actually go get shit done. Versus sometimes with hiring managers, there's always this weird conversation of who owns what. And with the CEO's involvement on high priority problems, you're able to get things moving much faster. Is that right?
Absolutely. I think it's with that kind of disconnect, I suppose, between hiring managers, CEOs, it's very easy for hiring managers to say, well, I don't really like the look of this CV. You know, the education's a hard requirement. Okay, is the education a hard requirement, or were you told the education's a hard requirement? And if I can go to the person who said that in the first place with the data, it's like, oh, lo and behold, we were able to open up a whole pool of candidates and actually, get things moving. And as I said, going from hiring 12 to 38 is insane. Like, it's been an absolute game changer.
But we all have those biases. Like, we all have those biases anyways. It's like, my wife went to Stanford. I did not, but like, I think it's great to like marry up and to be around those people. And I like those people. And so for me, like, I have a bias of like, oh yeah, like my wife's smart, like these other people are smart, but it doesn't mean you're going to be successful. And
No,
when you already have like, historical data, this is what the specifics on data, I think people say data and then don't click into the next level. Like, this is a great example of like, well, who's performing well? Let's go pull up their resumes, figure out where they went to school, and then say, are we sure that this is a requirement? Because our top performer, the employee you love, went to University of No Opportunity.
Exactly. And I say to my team all the time, like, I will back you in any scenario. I don't mind being unpopular. That's fine. Because you can't, with the data behind it, you can't lose. You can't. No one can argue with the facts of the numbers. And that's why it's so important for me and my team to bed it into everything that we do. And that was something, the other thing that I covered in the workshop, that it comes from that bedding in with the fact rather than feeling. And whilst everything in the world is being automated and moving forward, I do feel like recruitment and talent roles are still, there's bedded feelings, it's people. But being able to move away from that to actually get shit done, I think is so important. The other thing that we use at Cleo to do that is force ranking the competing roles in monthly prioritization meetings. So we sit down monthly and say, okay, what's actually important? When we first introduced them, they were a bit fiery. Like, we had one product director versus the other saying, well, they're doing my roles. No, they're doing mine. Where's the product? I'm going to be without this. But actually, again, bringing it back to the data and actually saying, okay, let's look at the hiring priorities against the business OKRs. So what's actually important? Are we focusing on a particular new bet in our chat pillar over the next quarter? Are we focusing on growth? Do we need to add more to this or that? Okay. Now that we've got that information, let's relook at the list of priorities. And then it becomes less about who can shout the loudest and more what is going to make the business impact fastest, and therefore who deserves the talent time. And that has got us so much further in making sure that all of the talent partners know exactly what they're doing and they're focusing on the right things, but also the buy-in from the stakeholders. You're not getting if you don't mind, have a look at this role. It's well, what OKR does that impact? What team does that benefit? And how is that essentially going to make Cleo better? Answer those questions for me. I'll get back to you on if I can work your role.
Okay, so it sounds like you run a dramatically different process than I have on this. So typically what I have done to stack rank priorities, and part of the reason you prioritize is, one, we have limited resources. Like, most businesses that are in hyper growth mode, like, literally cannot hire the amount of people that they want to hire. Two is you have different service level agreements. And so, like, for the top priority roles, like, you and your best people are going to be on that. And then for, middle priority roles, maybe it's like, we put kind of the rest of the army there. And then for low priority roles, maybe they get zero resources, or maybe they have to use an outside agency or something like that. Like, that's how I've always thought about it, but it's always been with the CEO. So sitting down for me in the recruiting monthly review, part of what we did is said, hey, this is what we said were our top priorities last month. How has that changed for you? And then we could always go, the king said, these are our new priorities. Get in line, everybody. But it sounds like what you're saying is you have this battle amongst the business leaders to stack rank their priorities. Like, what does that meeting look like?
Not so much a battle anymore. People have a lot of respect for the meeting now, but it was a battle to begin with. And I think what made it less of a battle is, again, you can't argue with the data. It's being able to say, look, here is the OKR planning for the year. These are our goals. This is what we've just decided on as a business. Barney's aligned. I'm sure the board's aligned. Not sure it goes that far above my pay grade, but who knows? But the business is aware this is what we're doing and this is the order we're doing it in. So if we know that we're not going to be shipping X feature until November. Why are my recruiters working on it when we need the resource sooner? That doesn't make sense to me. It's let's look at the business impact. Now, obviously, you've got things like time to hire, exec roles take longer, searches, all the rest of it. But that's where we use the historic data at the beginning of the process to know, okay, we need I don't know, head of CRM to join the marketing team. Okay. Well, when we did this search a few years ago, it took 6 months end to end.
Yeah.
Well, we can look at all of the conversion rates to know that everyone fell down at this stage. Okay, great. Well, let's dive in deeper to the data. Why were they failing that stage? Why did it take so long? Were we looking for the right thing? And therefore, we know that we can allocate enough time and resource to that based off of the historic data of time to fill when we've done it before. Now, very idealistic, what might I add? Very much that's great if you're a massive business and you've got all of that data. What if I don't? I understand that. Not everyone is in a position as luxurious as mine to have that information on tap. But what can I say? I'm a lucky girl. But yeah, I think the big thing for us is, leveraging the information we've got to hand. I find it interesting that that's something that your CEO tells you monthly. Because to me, the CEO is so far away from it. He's like, I trust that you lot know what you're doing. Go and do it.
When we were doing it, we were still like, call it like 500 to 800 employees. So the CEO is still like very much aware of like what's going on. But what is the cadence of this meeting that you have? Is it once a month?
Monthly.
And so is it all of the business leaders?
SLT, and the wider management team, it's optional. So it's very much a case of we don't shift priorities monthly because obviously some of those roles will still be in flight. It's more this is the squad makeup that was pre-agreed at the beginning of the year or whatever, that we're focusing on these bets, so we need these squads. Okay, this is where we're going to focus our efforts on hiring. So then monthly, it's like just ensuring, okay, is everybody, has anything changed? Are there any major backfills? Are we doing a new project launch, a product launch even? And where can we go from there?
Got it. And what is SLT for you guys?
Senior leadership team.
Okay, so is that all the CEO's directs?
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes more sense. So how big is that? Is it just those people plus you?
It's those people plus me and my talent leads, of which there is 4. So then we've got, and then prior to that meeting happening, there is a sort of reminder that goes out to the SLT representatives that they need to essentially confer with their reports and make sure that they're happy.
That makes sense. Okay, so you're keeping it basically to like the executive team, and the executive team can operate at a more strategic level. I actually like your version better because what used to happen after my meeting was exec team member was pissed that CEO recommended this and then would have a side conversation, and then the CEO would change their opinion after that side conversation. So that's actually even better. So then after that meeting, does then Bonnie, your CEO, then see the output of it and say like, this makes sense to me? Or is CEO just trust the executive team and say, I trust them to operate the business. Let's get going.
Most of the time, the latter. Yeah. Barney doesn't need to know where the engineers are going. He trusts that those decisions are made by the people who are in seat. He likes to have an overview of things like the numbers of people coming in and how quickly. But yeah, in terms of like where they land, he trusts the exec team.
When there's disagreement, which there's always disagreement in hiring priorities, regardless of how in sync you are, how does that get resolved?
When there were disagreements, it was because it wasn't tied back to planning. It was a bit of this is what we've got open, shoot your shot, tell us why you're most important, right? Now, it's a lot less chaotic because me or my team are able to say, I understand, Mr. Head of Growth, that you want us to focus on the growth roles, but Head of Chat, for example, is saying, Chat, if we link back, where are we in the year? We're in wherever, beginning of, H2, what have you. Okay, well, it takes on average X amount of time to fill these roles. They need to start here. So therefore, this is where we should be focusing our efforts. And you can't really argue with that because that planning cycle has been locked in by the people in the room. And there's always someone who's, I should have raised this earlier. And ultimately, your planning is your problem. And that's where it comes back to that. Have some fucking respect for my team's time. Don't send them down the garden path of working on something that's not relevant or you're going to put on ice when they could be focusing their efforts and their energies somewhere that matters.
Yeah. And even more than that is like actually make planning thoughtful and useful. And because like most planning cycles, of which people start in like August, right, becomes stale by February 1st for like, it's supposed to be for the entire year. And by February 1st, like the planning cycle is stale. And so what you guys are doing is you're making planning super important to have initial alignment and strategic thought about where we're going. But things do change in a business. And so we're getting, all of the important commanders together for one meeting to say, okay, it's the monthly review, things change. Here's what we're focused on. Let's make sure that we're all aligned so that recruiting isn't off on some expedition that isn't the most important thing for the business.
Agreed. That's exactly it.
All right, Lucy, where can people find you? Are you in like London somewhere? Are we going to get you to the United States soon? What's the deal?
I'm in London. Yes, I would happily come and see you in the United States. So Cleo are a London-based business, but we have people in the US and in Spain, Portugal, Poland, and a few other sort of outposts in Europe. But yeah, we're on a massive scaling journey, which I'm really, really excited to be leading, I guess. And yeah, but no, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for taking the time, Lucy.